couple of days ago, a clip went viral by G20 Sherpa. He says that India is not necessarily a winner in the AI race. Is that an accurate assessment?
The race is never won by those who launched the race.
India will be the determiner of its own fate in AI.
Today we have a special episode where I have two of the main actors in the world today, governments and the big tech firm. Mr. Kant has been one of India's most prominent bureaucrats. He served as India's G20 Sherpa. Prior to that, he served as the CEO of the NITI Aayog. Wilson is Vice President, Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. When something like Iran happens, for a global big tech firm like Google, what does that trigger internally?
No one company or no one country can do this alone.
What role do you see big tech firms like Google playing in India's own AI path?
Google, our own AI ambitions are not achievable without India. Our fates are intertwined. If we can solve for India, we're really solving for access globally.
India has the talent, the skill, the IT companies, and the digital public infrastructure. Big tech is important, but please use India to co-create. Use India to drive R&D. Use India for tech diffusion.
If you weren't an IAS officer, what would you have been? For those who are interested in that intersection of public policy and AI, advice for them? Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Great Tech Game podcast, where we bring you some of the world's best thinkers at the intersection of technology, geopolitics, and global affairs. And today we have a special episode where I have two people here who are representing two, I believe, of the main actors that we are seeing in the world today, governments and policy and tech firms, especially the big tech firms in our world. And so I'm delighted to have both of these perspectives today together on our show. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Mr. Kant and Wilson. Mr. Kant, for those of you who might not know, but I'm sure know, has been one of India's most prominent and dynamic bureaucrats. He served as India's G20 Sherpa for the year when India held its presidency and until last year in 2025. Prior to that, he served as the CEO of the NITI Aayog. I'm a big fan of the various op-eds I read, Mr. Kant, very frequently across a wide range of topics where, as I like to say, you try and inject a dose of common sense into policy framing in India and the strategic landscape of India. Mr. Kant has ultimately been a very inspiring figure, I think, for many of us who see a vibrant public sector as key to India becoming a Viksit Bharat by 2047. To my left, I have Wilson White. Wilson is Vice President, Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google, based out of Singapore. So we're excited to have you here in India.
Thank you.
Wilson, he's the Global Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Google's core product areas, handles the APAC region, but also global affairs for a few of Google's core product areas. And before joining Google's public policy team, he was a patent litigation lawyer. I'm going to start off with something that I think is top of mind, Mr. Kant and Wilson, for everyone in the world, which is Iran. Geopolitics, of course, is the core of what I cover on the Great Tech Game podcast. And the Iran crisis has shown in many ways that geopolitics can impact not just governments, but also big tech firms. So while many of us are familiar with what governments start to do when crises like this hit, right? Foreign ministers, national security advisors, various economic departments of a government will start and kick into action. Wilson, I want to start off with a question to you. When something like Iran happens, for a global big tech firm like Google, what does that trigger internally? What kind of actions, what kind of thinking, what kind of concerns does a company like Google start focusing on the moment a crisis as big and consequential as Iran gets triggered?
It's a good question. It's one of the most important questions, I think, that we tackle now, given today's geopolitical situation. And I think today's geopolitics requires companies like ours to go beyond just normal operational security and to really move into operational resiliency. So when a crisis like Iran happens, our focus immediately goes to how do we ensure the protection of our personnel. So when Iran happened, we immediately relocated our personnel to safe zones so that we can continue operations. But then the next focus is also ensuring that we can preserve the integrity of our services and that we have continuity in our services. So we distribute our digital infrastructure globally, so that outage in one area doesn't really take down the entire global networks. And that's been an area that we've been doing a lot of focus on. One thing that we've noticed in these geopolitical crises as well is the information part of these crises. And what we've been doing recently, and it played out again in the recent conflict in Iran, is using specialized AI to mitigate or even neutralize disinformation to ensure that vital citizen information, right, like where to go for safety, maps, that citizen services can be accurate, so that users are getting the right information during this very, very, very vulnerable time period.
Of course, this is the first time. I think there might have been other instances, but at least in recent years, this is the first time I've noticed a country specifically name big tech firms and infrastructure, right? Tech infrastructure, whether it's data centers or other forms of infrastructure, be a specific target of attack. When that happens, are you, as a big tech firm, ultimately going to rely on governments and their security infrastructure to protect you? Or are you building out parallel security protocols, etc., to protect your own infrastructure?
Yeah, I think this is what we partner very closely with governments, because it's a bit of both, right? No one company or no one country can do this alone. So we partner with governments around the world to ensure that we are able to distribute our digital infrastructure globally, so that this crisis doesn't take down one company or take down one country when these types of situations happen. So we're very much doing this in partnership with governments around the world.
And any key lessons out of this crisis? Things that now Google is going to do differently going forward?
I think there's always learnings in these. One of the I guess high level learnings that I've taken from this crisis, and this really seeped into our senior leadership's kind of mindset, is that we need to always think about resiliency as the kind of key motivator for how we're making our investments, how we're building our architecture and infrastructure, how we're making investments, where we're making those investments, how we're partnering with governments and other stakeholders in that matrix of ideas, so that resiliency is always at the forefront.
Mr. Khan, let me turn to you. When this crisis happened, from a government standpoint, I understand you're not part of the government right now, but is the response that governments typically will have to kick into, like this whole set of actions, very different from what Wilson was describing, or is it very similar? If so, how did you see the Indian response this time to the crisis?
So, from a government perspective, it's very important that supply chains are ensured, that citizens are not impacted by conflicts across the world. And it's important to say this, that actually what we are seeing is that a period of peace and stability across the world since post-World War II is being replaced by conflicts in the heart of Europe for over 4 years. We saw conflict in Middle East. You're seeing conflict in West Asia. There's a second major issue, and that is that supply chains across the world have been totally broken down. That has been replaced by protectionism and tariffs. And thirdly, efficiency in supply chains are now being replaced by resilience. It's being replaced by trust. It's being replaced by redundancy. And therefore, it's very important from a government perspective to ensure that citizens' lives are not impacted. From an Indian perspective, it was very important that we ensure the continued flow of oil and gas for the citizens. We ensured the continued supply of LPGs for citizens so that their lives are not impacted. And therefore, energy, payments, shipping, all this is critical. And looking at the larger dimension, that the citizens' lives are not impacted in terms of inflation. So the overall macroeconomic perspective of the economy is very critical. And that, to my mind, the government of India has done extremely well to ensure that the common citizen in India continues its life of normalcy and continues to enhance its production and productivity.
Yeah. I think the geopolitical conflict that you refer to, that has been going on for now several years and has become the norm and not the exception anymore, has clearly led governments to think deeply about supply chain resilience, redundancies, the things that you were mentioning. But if I can ask you this, are we, one, moving fast enough to reduce the core risks that have clearly emerged, right? The core dependencies that a country like India might have on certain regions or in certain sectors. One, are we moving fast enough? And also, much like I asked Wilson, what are maybe a couple of lessons that we've learned out of the Iran crisis that are maybe new, that were not there maybe from the experience of, let's say, Ukraine impacting us or other conflicts impacting us?
So one key lesson out of this, Anirudh, is that it was a globalized world. You used to import, do value addition, exports. But what the present world has demonstrated is that you need to be self-reliant on several aspects, one of which is energy.
Yeah.
You can't be an importer of large energy resources, especially at a time when India has huge
Growth.
ability to become self-reliant through renewables. That's
Yes.
critical. The second is that you can't be dependent on other countries for critical mineral processing. Critical minerals are available, but processing has been monopolized, and therefore you need to be a champion of processing.
Yeah.
This is critical to my mind. Thirdly, you can't be totally dependent on semiconductors. This is important, that you can be a part of supply chain, but you need semiconductors and chips. Ultimately, the world will grow and expand on chips, and that's important. And fourthly, to my mind, make sure that the future of the world is driven by clean energy technologies. And therefore, these are four areas on which India is working. It's driven renewable energy in a very big way. Today, it has about 270 gigawatts of renewable energy. Almost 50% of its electricity is driven by non-fossil fuel. It has brought in close to 12 companies for semiconductor chip manufacturing. It was a large designer of chips, but now 12 companies are doing chip manufacturing in India.
Yeah, we just announced two more.
Just yesterday. And thirdly, it's really pushed for the critical mineral mission in a very large way so that processing eventually is driven in India. And fourthly, I think to my mind, really the key is that the world will have to be driven by clean energy. You can't have so much of computing power. Eventually, the world will need far more sophisticated software with less computing. And the computing of the world, you can't have the world doing artificial intelligence and computing with energy today being more than the consumption of energy being more than the country of Japan. So you need clean energy to drive this, and that is where India has a huge advantage in terms of its climatic conditions, in terms of its having one grid across the country, and in terms of its ability to do more and more renewables and to have the policy conditions where it has been able to attract private capital and attract venture funds and private equity into its renewable movement. So India is the only country in the world which has been a champion of renewables in a very, very big way. And computing will all have to be driven by renewables and clean energy in the future.
Okay. Did the Iran crisis change calculations internally in some way when it comes to your energy plan as a company?
Well, I couldn't agree with Mr. Kant more. I think renewable energy is a key part of that. When we talk to governments around the world in terms of how they should be thinking about their AI readiness, there are four pillars to this that we talk to governments about. The very first one is to have power first strategies, right? Having robust clean energy strategies, streamlining clean infrastructure permits so that you can support this massive, massive demand for compute.
Yeah, no, that's a great segue into the second theme I want to start covering with both of you, which is an assessment of India's AI ecosystem. Right, India's just come off a couple of months ago, having pulled off the India AI Impact Summit in Delhi. I'm not sure if it's new.
I was there. It was a very successful summit.
So massive, I think, summit, which I think in many ways announced to the world that India is serious about its AI ambitions. It brought together a great group of people. But at the same time, Mr. Khan, just I think a couple of days ago, a clip went viral on social media by Ruchesh Sharma, who's an investor based out of New York, but covers India's domestic politics as well as the economy.
Unfortunately for India, in contrast to what happened in the tech boom in 1999-2000, this time, as far as AI is concerned, foreigners have taken the view that India is a loser in the AI race.
Where he says that from a global investor perspective, India is not necessarily a winner in the AI race. So, Mr. Kant, I wanted to get your view. Is that an accurate assessment? Why or why not?
So my view is that that's not an accurate assumption for several reasons. One is, what drives AI? He's looking at only the frontier models. Absolutely right. As far as frontier models are concerned, the US is in the lead. Undeniably, it's way ahead of every other country. China is a close second. Frontier model. Second is computing power. Let's be very clear. Computing power, NVIDIA, way ahead of others. But the critical thing about AI is that you can't drive computing power, you can't build frontier models without data.
Correct.
20% of the global data is in India. Let's be clear. Fourthly, you can't drive this without data centers of the future. For data centers, you need energy. The renewable energy will come from India. The data centers will happen in India in the long run. And fifthly, to my mind, is very important. It's not about frontier models. It's about diffusion of technology. At the end of the day, the game will be won by those who are able to diffuse technology and deploy use cases for the betterment of society. How do you transform education? How do you improve learning outcomes? How do you improve health outcomes? How do you improve nutritional standards? And those use cases will come from India. They will be built from India for the global south. And to my mind, the huge advantage for India is that it's already built the digital public infrastructure model, which has demonstrated its great ability to do open source, open API, globally interoperable model. And the last point I want to make is that this race for AI actually has just begun. The race is never won by those who launched the race. Clive Osborne did the first computer. The race was not won by him. He went bust.
Yeah.
The race was won by Steve Jobs of Apple. Alta Vista did the first internet. It went bust. The race was won by Google in the long run. So I think we are in. Yeah, so we're in for a long race. And I think it's important that data, energy, and diffusion will be the key deciding factors in this race.
Let me come in on this, because I think what Mr. Khan has laid out is remarkably consistent with how we think about this. I mentioned earlier this AI readiness framework that we talk to governments about. First being power first, having robust clean energy strategies. The second one is having these AI corridors where you have these strategic hubs that bring together land and energy and tax incentives and regulatory sandboxes where you can experiment and deploy this. India is doing that. One of the things that we've announced recently is a strategic investment in an AI hub in Andhra Pradesh, in Vizag. That hub is not only part of this kind of AI corridors, but it's also strategically putting India on at the top of the game globally around this. A third element of that framework is open public data sets. As Mr. Kant alluded to, the data that you have here in India is vital to any AI system that's going to be leading the world. In order to solve real challenges in education or healthcare or science, these are the things that you need to have that. And I think India is leading the world in having that type of rich public data and making it open. And then lastly, I will say that one of the things that India has already done, and this is the DPI framework, layering AI on top of things like UPI or Aadhaar really democratizes the technology. One of the things that I saw in full form at the AI Summit is how the country is thinking about this technology in a democratic way. How do we give radical access to this technology? That the diffusion point that you're making, Mr. Khan. India is leading the world in it. Every AI summit that we've had up to this point, access was not at the key of this, and India put that on the map in a meaningful way. And that's really going to be the differentiator. Of course, companies like ours, we're building the infrastructure and the platforms, but it leaves rooms for countries to think about their unique applications for how they're solving problems for their people. And I think India's third way is already leading the world in that regard.
Yeah. So, Wilson, I want to come back to the point that you picked up about the role tech firms will play, helping countries build up both their AI infrastructure, but also their overall hubs and ecosystems. Before I do that, Mr. Khan, let me ask you this. The strengths are clear, right? So you're saying there's a lot of data that, of course, India is sitting on, given we are a digitally connected country today, massive number of financial transactions through UPI, a lot of internet usage, etc., across sectors. There's, of course, the renewable energy point you've made that we have the potential to grow our renewable energy capacity as well. But where are there still gaps, right? Clearly, there are gaps because we are not, as you said, at the cutting edge today, whether of diffusion or of innovation. So where do you see the critical gaps that India needs to fill quickly so that we can actually achieve the potential we have in AI?
So, Anirudh, another point I want to make, and that is, to my mind, critical, that the world is going to work on trust. The world is going to work in a democratic framework. And the world is going to work with countries which have pro-innovation regulatory policies. And India's policy on data, India's policy on AI is extremely progressive. It's not a backward-looking policy. It's a very pro-innovation policy. And therefore, to my mind, in the long run, India will be a great beneficiary in terms of diffusion of technology. But India needs to up its game on computing power. We are working in the AI mission with GPUs, 34,000. But, look at the scale at which the transformation is taking place. So you need much more computing power with research institutions, etc. Also with startups. The second is that you need to build a more vibrant, dynamic R&D ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Why does this happen in the United States? It happens because of the university level students work with the professors. There's a huge flow of venture capital.
That's true.
And therefore, you build up great startups. India needs to build up a very vibrant deep tech ecosystem. And that's why the government of India is now putting in about 1 lakh crore into the R&D ecosystem with private-public partnership. It's starting a deep tech fund of funds so that it can attract a lot of venture capital into this deep tech fund of funds.
Yeah.
And my view is that will really drive deep tech innovation in a much more bigger way. India has driven the patent system. We've moved up the ladder. We do it now, register patents much quicker than USA or Japan. But those patents need to be commercialized in the long run. And therefore, building up this very dynamic ecosystem, R&D, vibrancy, all that in the long run is critical to build up an intelligent society of tomorrow. Yeah. But India has the talent, and what India has demonstrated, if you look at the Stanford AI Index, is that in the last, out of its 9 years of Stanford AI Index, last year, actually, India became an absorber of technology. It had been sending out talent to the rest of the world. But last year, a lot of AI talent came back to India to drive many of the global 2,117 global capability centers in India. Imagine the world's AI models are being driven from the GCCs of India by much of the AI talent coming back to India. That's unparalleled.
Yeah, helped in a little bit maybe by
We see it a lot. I mean, our biggest footprint outside of the U.S. is here in India because the talent is here, and I think the talent part is not questionable at all. I will say, in addition to all of the things that you mentioned, Mr. Khan, which I agree with all of them, another thing that India is doing well. I think if they continue to do well, they'll continue this exponential trajectory that they're on. Is AI and leadership alignment? AI can't be relegated to just IT departments. It needs to have a top-down, full of government approach to how you're thinking about AI, and I've seen that here in India. It's a nationwide effort from top down to think of AI as a national strategy, not just from compute power and those things, but also skilling, making sure that we're preparing the workforce for an AI-powered economy. And these are priorities that exist already in India, and I think those investments are going to pay off exponentially.
Yeah, but Wilson, let me also use the perspective that you have as running APAC policy for Google to try and get some lessons from what you're seeing other countries in APAC do in AI, right? So of course we've spoken at great length now about India's strengths, what India's trying to do. But if you look at countries across APAC, are you seeing things that a Malaysia or a Taiwan or a Japan or a Korea or another country or Singapore in APAC is doing that India could learn from and incorporate into its AI strategy?
Yeah, and some of these elements are already existing in India. So I'll call out some of the things that from our perspective, have been very helpful in powering AI ecosystems, some of which are already being done here. So one, as Mr. Kant mentioned, having a pro-innovation AI regulatory framework. And the new frameworks that have been promulgated here in India, I think, is very much forward-looking, pro-innovation. You got to have that as a baseline. Then when you start getting into implementing regs, how these regulations are playing out in specific sectors, that's where you have to stay true to that and pro-innovation framework. And where we're seeing this in some other countries in the region that's doing pretty well, is thinking about other legacy legal regimes that may need to be revisited in an AI world, right? Mr. Kant, you mentioned patents and intellectual property. That's an area that is long history of legal frameworks around that may need to be rethought in terms of what the societal trade-offs are in the world of AI, where we want the benefits of AI to be achieved. Copyright is another one of these examples that some countries are thinking about. How do we create different exceptions to copyright law to allow for local investments in AI and local models that actually have those benefits play out in specific ways for their citizens?
Your background as a patent litigation attorney is not...
It's being useful in some ways. In some ways, I probably should have studied more copyright law, because that's, I think, one of the biggest things.
That's right.
Other countries are having central repositories of public data, which having access to high quality data is one of the most important things you can have in order to power an AI ecosystem. And some countries have done that. They've opened up their public data sets, make it centralized, and then have the entire ecosystem, from universities to the private sector to government agencies, leverage that data to really solve problems in key sectors. And then the last thing I'll say that I've seen some countries around the region, particularly here in Asia, have done is they've actually started leveraging regulatory sandboxes in a much more aggressive way. We don't really know how these things are going to play out as we deploy AI solutions. But if you don't have the ability to experiment with these things, we won't learn what works, what doesn't work, what guardrails need to be put in place. And so having I think a healthy use of regulatory sandboxes allows us to do what we say at Google, to be bold and responsible. We can push the bounds of this technology. We can solve big challenges, but do it in a responsible way so that the benefits are being received, but people are being safe at the same time.
Yeah. One of the reasons I was excited to have this conversation with both of you is that clearly in a country's AI strategy, Mr. Khan, a government can't play this alone, right? AI is largely being driven by private tech firms today. global ones at that. And of course, one hopes that startups from all over the world, including from India, will become the future, big AI firms and big tech firms. But in the meanwhile, I wanted to ask you, Mr. Kant, what role do you see big tech firms like Google, but even others, playing in India's own AI path, right? Currently, what are they doing that is productive or helping? And what are things that you'd like them to do here in India that they are maybe not doing yet?
And I'll be taking notes, by the way. So
It was intended for you to hear.
Good feedback, yeah.
So first of all, I'm a great believer in big tech firms being very critical players in driving innovation. So if India's ambition is to become a 35 plus trillion dollar economy by the time it becomes 100 in 2047, is very important to get the best technology companies. They will bring in technology, they will bring in capital, they'll bring in the best talent across the world, and they will actually drive innovation in India. It's important.
Yeah.
From an AI perspective, it's very important that we don't isolate ourselves. We become a part of the global system. And it's important to understand this, that when we talk about sovereign AI does not mean that you become an isolationist.
That's true.
There's no such thing as being sovereign in an AI world. I mean, try and understand this, that even United States of America is dependent on ASML for lithography machines. Try and understand that the rest of the world, including China, is dependent on NVIDIA's GPU machines. Try and understand that a lot of world is dependent on coolants coming in from Qatar gas for helium. So it's an interdependent, globalized world. We are all dependent on each other to drive innovation. Big tech is important, but big tech coming to India means that it should not just use data of Indians only for driving innovation in other parts of the world.
Right.
Please do not make India a colony of the rest of the world. That will be reverse colonization. Use India to co-create. Use India to drive R&D. Use India for tech diffusion. Use India to transform India's learning outcomes and health outcomes. Use India to change the lives of the citizens of India. And when you do this, you will be creating models not for India, but for the next 4.5 billion people of the world who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next decade. So use the power of AI to really change the lives of citizens across the world, lift them above poverty lines. And that is what AI must do. And that is really the critical role of what big tech companies like Google must do. And they have done it with DeepMind, opening vast amount of research in the field of pharmaceuticals and biosimilar. And similarly, when they really use the power of AI in a country like India, they are transforming the lives of 1.5 billion people in India, but they will then be transforming the lives of the next 4.5 to 5 billion people of the world. And that is what Google must do in India.
Yeah. So I think that's a great clarion call, right, from Mr. Kant about the range of things that a company like Google or tech firms broadly can do. We don't mean to put
No, I think
you on the spot, Wilson.
I'm happy to do
But
it.
tell me, if you were to hear that clarion call and you were to do an honest self-assessment of what tech firms like Google are thinking about when they think about India, do you think there are clear pieces where Google needs to do more and there are pieces where maybe Google is doing a lot?
I couldn't agree with what Mr. Kant said. His vision on this is 100% aligned with the company's vision globally, but also our vision for India. It's core to our company's mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And that access piece, that's the core of what you're saying. And that's really how India is leading the world It's not just 1.5 billion people here in India, but it's the oracle of the entire global south, and the next 5 billion people that'll come online in a digital and AI powered economy. And so we see India as the leader of that. If we can solve for India, we're really solving for access globally, and that's been our commitment here. You see the investments that we're making in helping India on its own AI journey are designed to be a strategic partner to the country in doing that. That's really what our orientation is. Look, we think we have a lot to offer in that regard, right? We have the full stack approach to AI. Some of that will be useful to India in its own journey, and we want to be able to offer that and partner with the country on that. But India will be the determiner of its own fate in AI. And I think India has a reservoir of talent, a reservoir of those component parts like renewable energy to really set itself apart around the world. And we are very, very grateful and appreciative of the opportunity to be on that journey with India as it goes now.
Great. So if I can push further a little bit on that, Wilson. So I believe that, of course, with your investment in the strategic hub in Vizag, where you're doing subsea cables, data centers, etc., there's clearly a push on the AI infrastructure piece. But is enough being done on some of the other pieces that Mr. Khan mentioned, setting up much bigger R&D labs? As far as I understand, there isn't a deep mine equivalent initiative out of India. But correct me if
Yeah,
I'm
we
wrong.
do. We've done that with DeepMind here in India.
So is the future R&D plans for Google keeping India at the core, or is that still not so clear?
Yeah, I think Google, our own AI ambitions are not achievable without India. So our fates are intertwined, which is why we're making investments in frontier research here in India. Google DeepMind is we've set up a shop here in India, and that shop is continuing to grow. We're making investments there. The infrastructure investments we've already referenced, but it goes even beyond that. It's thinking about the Indian reality, things like the multiple languages that exist here.
Yes.
How do we use AI to surface some of those languages that aren't English or Hindi or the big languages around the world, so that everyone has access to this technology? And that learning we're getting from being deeply partnering with the government of India. So we understand those contexts and bringing those things to life.
Let me now move to a different piece, right? So as we think about AI, we've discussed the AI capacity India's building, the role tech firms can play in that. But really, there's at the core also the geopolitics of AI, right? Countries and companies realize that this is the core of their competitive advantage. They want to keep as much of the competitive advantage with themselves. The US is doing that vis-a-vis China, for example. Of course, Google will want to do it vis-a-vis a Meta or an Amazon or a Microsoft. In a world where, Mr. Khan, geopolitics of AI is clearly going to be a key determinant of what a country is able to do or a company does or doesn't do, are you worried about access to frontier models being a concern for a country like India, despite it being an important piece of, let's say, Google's AI plans or any other large tech company's overall AI strategy?
India has the talent, the skill, the IT companies, and the digital public infrastructure to create better and better models and application layers with less computing powers in due course. So the challenge for the world will be that AI will get commoditized in the years to come.
The frontier models.
Absolutely. It'll get commoditized. We should not be in a position where our own data is used to build models and then sold to us as products at high cost.
Yeah.
It's important for India to build very good application layers. You can't be a champion of everything in the world. The challenge for India is to become a champion of good applications, good use cases, but also in the entire scheme of AI, you have to be a champion of some of the nodes in the entire layer. And to my mind, you can't be a champion of frontier models, you can't be a champion of computing power, but you can be a champion of energy, you can be a champion of talent, and you will be a champion of diffusion.
Yeah.
So there are three areas in which India must become a champion. In diffusing the AI technology
Correct.
for use cases, transforming lives of citizens using AI. It must become the champion of talent, because the new Stanford AI Index demonstrates that India is absorbing talent from the rest of the world. And thirdly, to my mind, it must demonstrate that it is able to do AI with less and less of computing power, but with better software.
Correct. Is Mr. Kant right that frontier AI models will get commoditized? Because if that is true, then that might bring into question the massive investments that some of the big tech firms like yourselves are doing, right? And the ROI you might get from it.
I think
Stop agreeing with them all the
I'm
time.
agreeing with them
That's
on
all right.
everything.
No.
We need to have an issue that we
That's
disagree
not
on.
why I brought a tech firm and a government who said together for you to agree on it.
But that combination of talent and building on top of, for example, our open source models, Gemma. You have a frontier model that's been open source. India can build on top of that, and its huge reservoir of talent will take that much further than just having a frontier model alone. India-specific applications can easily be built on top of that. What I do think is a point that is worth underscoring that Mr. Kant made, which is the need for global interoperability around this, because around the world, this conversation around sovereignty is very loud right now. And it's understandable given the unpredictability in the geopolitical space. Every country is thinking about how do we ensure we protect our citizens and our talent and our productivity and our economic prosperity. And that's the right questions to be asking. The answer, though, is not to isolate, as Mr. Kant said. And I think that's worth underscoring, because if we truly are going to create access to the benefits of this technology from around the world, if we're going to achieve that goal, it's going to require global interoperability. It's going to require countries to work with countries, for companies to work with.
But let me now move into, I think, something that we've been touching upon, Mr. Kant, but have not explicitly addressed, which is there a inherent tension or inherent contradiction between what, Wilson, you were saying, that there has to be this interoperability, global interoperability across models, an open diffusion model, etc., versus a sovereign AI approach, right? So as India tries to build itself as the use capital for the world, as India tries to build its own sovereign AI models, like Sarvam was demonstrated very well, I think, at the India AI Summit as well. Clearly, we want to adopt global AI models so that we can benefit the farmer, the student, etc., and the patient in India. But will that fast adoption of global AI models, whether open source or proprietary, ultimately make our own sovereign AI model push meaningless? Is there an inherent tension there? Or will these continue somehow in parallel? Because, of course, on the other hand, you have a model which China has adopted. For a country like India, we must look at the US model in some ways, but then also the Chinese model, and then see what our way has to be. The Chinese model is clearly very different. They're saying that, sure, the US and big tech firms out of the US might be developing their frontier models. I'm not going to push for adoption of those models to benefit my farmer, my student, my patient. I'm going to build my own. And this is going to go almost as separately, whereas India is not saying that. So do you see an inherent contradiction in that?
Two things. One is that's very important for India not to close itself from the world.
Correct.
Innovation is happening in one part of the world. India must benefit from that innovation to transform lives. Secondly, AI will not be fit for purpose if it is not multilingual. AI will not be fit for purpose if we do not have use cases for education, health, nutrition. AI will not be fit for purpose if it is not low bandwidth in the long run. AI will not be fit for purpose if we are not able to make it open source, open API, globally interoperable. It's very important. We've done this with digital public infrastructure. Our belief and our learning from digital public infrastructure is that technology benefits citizens. And exactly we should do the same. We should have DPI for artificial intelligence that is really critical. And in the long run, the world must benefit from it. The power of AI, the innovation of AI must eventually lead to lifting vast segments of population above the poverty line. And that is critical.
So that is the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Wilson, for you, is there an inherent tension between countries around the world saying we want to build up sovereign AI stacks, our sovereign models, with what Google or other tech firms have in mind?
No, I think it's important for governments to think through their own national strategy around AI. They have issues that they need to solve for their citizens. So this instinct around sovereignty, I think, is understandable. The way it plays out, though, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Kant. Having your sovereign approach to AI should not be isolationist. And for us, we pride ourselves in having the full stack, from chips all the way to the infra, to the platforms, and even applications. So we have a lot to offer. You may pull some of that from Google. You may pull other parts of that natively. You may pull all of that from other private sector players. It's up to the country to decide which aspects of that will play into their national strategy. And I think that's the sovereign piece, is the country decides where they're going to get aspects of that stack.
Correct. And of course, if I may add, I think one of the key pieces of sovereign as a word has to mean that you have the freedom of decision making.
Correct.
I think the autonomy of decision making for a country is very critical, even if you're dependent on an ASML for certain things, or the US for certain things, or tomorrow, let's say Singapore or Taiwan for certain things. I think the autonomy of decision making, being able to choose which models, which infrastructure stack, what kind of energy sources, I think that'll be critical for countries
No, the
to maintain.
applications have to be
And the
built here.
applications.
Which node of the verticality you want to specialize in.
Correct.
That decision has to be taken by India.
By India. That's right. Let me start with the rapid fire set of questions first with you, Mr. Kant. UPI or AI, which will have a bigger impact on India's GDP by 2030?
I think AI for sure.
Sovereign AI, is it a must-have or a nice-to-have for a middle power?
Sovereign AI, which is not isolationist, and sovereign AI, which is used to transform lives of citizens.
Compute, data, energy, or talent. All pieces we've discussed today. Compute, data, energy, or talent. Which is the scarcest resource right now for India?
Computing power.
Regulation. Does first mover on regulation have an advantage, or is a wait-or-see approach a better approach?
Pro-innovation regulation is the way.
India's tech strategy, one thing India needs to change immediately in our approach.
We should become a product nation, focus on R&D.
Biggest dependency India needs to remove, tech or energy?
I think push for renewable energy, become a champion of renewable energy.
It'll help in removing your tech dependency.
Target for 1,500 gigawatt of clean renewable energy by 2030.
Wow.
I think that's a great clarion call again. India's private sector. One thing you'd like the private sector, the private tech sector in India to do differently.
Well, become far more innovative.
So more R&D focused.
Spend more on R&D. That's critical. Every Indian company must now become more and more R&D oriented.
Yeah. One thing you'd like the government or the public sector to do differently.
Create a very large deep tech fund. Create a fund of minimum 2 lakh crore deep tech funds, which will then attract a number of venture capital to support startup movements.
Yeah. Institutionally, does India need a tech envoy? Like you have a G20 Sherpa, you have a climate envoy in the past. Does India need a tech envoy or an AI envoy?
No, every single CEO of India, every single minister of India, they all must be ambassadors of AI. Not a single one, but each one of them must be a champion of AI.
I'm going to move.
This is a general purpose technology. It must get embedded in every sector of India.
I'm going to move from policy focused questions now to some personal ones, Mr. Kant. If you weren't an IAS officer in this lifetime, what would you have been?
I would become a startup
AI entrepreneur.
You would have been great. You would have been great if you'd done that.
Favorite activity, other than, of course, all the work hats you wear, favorite activity? Where will we find Mr. Kant when he's not on podcasts or in government meetings or on board meetings?
Golfing course.
Golfing course. I believe mountains as well?
Yeah, I do trekking and I would prefer to be on
Yeah. And advice to Gen Z, should they learn how to vibe code with AI today, or should they learn how to better communicate and negotiate, which I think you are probably a champion of?
Use AI to do coding. You don't need to be a big techie. Today, all these models enable you to do coding.
So
And very
focus,
simply.
so focus in many ways on the softer skills, communication, negotiation,
Absolutely.
things like that.
Absolutely. That's good.
Let me move to you, Wilson. Open source or proprietary? Which one will win the battle for the global south?
I think open source.
The biggest advantage Google today has over its peers in AI. And don't say Sundar Pichai.
Well, that's the number one. I mean, you have Sundar Pichai. He's such a visionary leader. I think that's a differentiator. But I think the one advantage we have now is that we've been investing in AI for a very long time, and as a result, we have the full stack. And I think that separates us from any of our peers.
Yeah, we've of course focused on AI a lot today, but is there a focus area for Google that's other than AI, the top focus area for Google?
I think AI is it.
That's it?
AI is our focus.
Compute, data, or energy, which is the scarcest resource for Google today?
I would actually say memory, not those three. Like the memory, the demands on compute is creating demands for memory, and that we have a huge supply problem with storage capacity. Data centers are out of that, but a lot of our consumer products, the things that day-to-day people are having, the cost of those are going to go up because of the cost of memory, because of the supply problem. It's an area that we need to pay attention to.
Silicon Valley, Bangalore, Beijing, or Singapore, where do you expect the biggest killer app for the next billion to come from?
Question is whether it'll be a killer app as we think of apps today. Like I think AI is going to change that. It may be a AI agent that comes and solves these big challenges, and that's most likely will come from Bangalore than the other capitals that you mentioned.
One thing India is doing right in its tech strategy, and one thing it could do differently.
India, I think, is doing a lot of things right. The investments are right. The focus on renewable energy is right. The focus on being creative and creating these economic and strategic hubs that attract investments. The regulatory approach is moving in the right direction. I think the one thing that I would say that the country can continue to focus on is ensuring that there is regulatory predictability and certainty. So these are big investments that are being made, and having that level of predictability, I think, will actually encourage more investments.
Okay, some personal questions. Since you're spending so much time in the APAC region, favorite city in Asia, food-wise?
Food-wise, oh wow!
You thought I'd ask.
And I'm sitting in India now, so I need to be smart about this. Indian food across the board is very diverse, like the languages here. So Indian food writ large, I think, is really good.
Try some good Kerala cuisine, appam and stew.
That's right.
Stew, okay.
Yeah,
Will
which is my favorite food.
And
Okay.
fish moili.
Fish
And
more.
fish moili.
Yeah.
Correct. Incredible food. I think other than Punjabi, North Indian food that you get all over the world, I think it's the Kerala food in
Kerala.
India that you've got to have. Yeah. And you have places in Delhi where you can get good ones too. If you weren't at Google, Wilson, where would you be?
I would be advising startups.
And final question, advice to the Gen Z or the younger folks watching this. Careers in public policy and AI, something that you're doing. For those who are interested in that intersection of public policy and AI, advice for them?
Go for it. I think that this is the tip of the spear in terms of how we help companies, how we help countries navigate this very, very uncertain future that we have. But AI ultimately will be used for good. And those folks who are pursuing that intersection of tech and policy are going to be the vanguard for making sure that that ends up being true.
Perfect. This has been great. You both have been very generous with your time, with your insights. So I can't thank you enough. And it's been great to have a tech firm's perspective, a government policy perspective. Mr. Kant, Wilson, thank you for sharing how governments and the private sector can work together. I think for the world, from a citizen standpoint, the more tech firms and governments can focus together on solving, as you, Mr. Kant, always say, the problems of the common person on the street, whether it's a farmer, a student, a patient. I think the better off we'll be, the more innovative we'll be, the more strategically interdependent we'll be. And so thank you for your time. And I hope this was as useful for you as it was
Very good.
for our viewers. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anirudh.